Hi, and welcome back to Twin Moons. Today we'll be looking at Schumann Resonance, and a paper that I've written on that gives some good detail about the changes that are happening energetically on the planet at the moment and how that relates to the Schumann Resonance and what we are starting to see in terms of changes with the Schumann Resonance and what the Schumann Resonance is. We'll be looking at the paper itself that I've produced, that I've published up on the website, as well as access to a Russian-based Schumann Resonance monitoring website that gives details on current state of the Schumann Resonance from a frequency as well as from an amplitude or a intensity perspective. So if we bring up that website now, which is my my primary website, what you see here is the website itself, and what we have is I've loaded under content the paper for Schumann Resonance, which is just called Schumann Resonance Explained as an info paper. So if you click on that, it will open up this paper. And so this paper really just explains what the Schumann Resonance is, which is effectively what's considered to be a resonant frequency that propagates between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. This resonant frequency basically bounces all the way around the planet. And so it was first identified actually back on the turn of the last century with Nikola Tesla theorizing and proposing that there was this resonance in the cavity that is now known as the Schumann cavity. But Tesla actually, with his advanced knowledge of electrodynamics and electromagnetic fields, was able to be what's believed to be the first person to detect it in any real sense. Even though modern science has attributed the if you'd like, rights recognition for detecting the resonant frequency of the planet to Winifred Otto Schumann from the University of Munich, who put forward somewhat 50 years after Tesla did, put forward a theory that there was this resonance and that there was this cavity which produced these resonant frequencies, and then actually detected it. And the important thing to note is the primary Schumann resonance frequency, and I'll get back to why I use the term primary rather than just the Schumann resonance frequency. But the primary Schumann resonance frequency is 7.83 hertz. So 7.83 cycles per second is what is detected and was for many years, for decades, since it was detected in 1952, was a stable, consistent frequency that would be propagated and detected anywhere around the planet. That's a really interesting point, that as a frequency, it was so consistent and so persistently able to be detected anywhere around the planet that it is considered the planet's heartbeat. And another very interesting correlation is that we, as a species on the planet, as an organic species, have a certain wavelength frequency for our own brain waves in what's called the alpha state, which is the normal conscious state where you're conscious and you're able to interact with your environment. And that happens to be 7.8 hertz, which is identical to the primary Schumann resonance frequency. And in fact, it is believed, and a great deal of research has gone into this, that the human brain is effectively entrained, is the term that we'd use. It is entrained in such a way that it synchronizes its core normal conscious frequency with the planet. And so if there's any change in that frequency, it has a noticeable impact on humanity. And that's been identified in clinical trials and tests, and a number of different scenarios where humans have been either isolated in a shielded room, isolated from the Schumann resonant frequency, and with some very startling results, namely behaviour somewhat akin to sleep deprivation, that if left uncorrected will actually lead to psychosis of an extreme nature. The interesting aspect of this Schumann resonance primary frequency is it was so consistent, so stable in terms of the frequency itself, and the fact that it could be detected all the way around the planet, that the US Navy, as I'll come to that here, the US Navy actually identified it as a ideal carrier wave for their deep blue ocean going fleet. And so the US Navy's blue water fleet used the 7.83 hertz for extremely low or extra low frequency ELF communication. And through tuning radio receivers and transmitters to this carrier wave and using it to carry other information, effectively using it to hitch a ride, for want of a better word. You could, the US Navy could use it to communicate with any ship anywhere in the world. So effectively, by just having this carrier wave being able to bounce the signal in the Schumann cavity, it could talk, a ship in the Atlantic could be talking to somebody on a ship in the Pacific easily. And this persisted for decades. In fact, this persisted, was so effective as a communication method that even the submersible submarine fleet used ELF frequencies to because of their distance traveling capability with relatively low loss of information, use that for their submersible communication as well. Now, before we get into some of the later findings to do with Schumann resonance and the changes to do with Schumann resonance, I wanted to call out a great article here by Stillness in the Storm, where there's a great background article on Schumann resonance that has a lot more detail. So I included the link here in the paper, and I highly recommend people to check it out. Click on that and to see that, and obviously Stillness in the Storm do some great work in terms of the analysing and putting forward thought-provoking material. Moving down through the paper, we get to a point where in the mid-90s, the US fleet started having basically radio signal dropout, and so at various points the radio receivers or transmitters would not be able to successfully transmit a radio signal. It was intermittent and cleared, but it became more and more persistent. And so investigation showed that in fact the carrier wave signal was that was used as the fundamental frequency for this transmission, 7.83 hertz, the primary Schumann resonance frequency, was experiencing periods of fluctuation and was changing quite rapidly and erratically, to the point that eventually the US fleet had to forego the use of that frequency, and so they've tuned their radios to a higher ELF frequency, but one that suffers less overall interference, but also one which does not have the ability to bounce information on the signal as it doesn't necessarily correlate to the Schumann resonant cavity, so it can't be bounced halfway around the world necessarily. But there are plenty of other frequencies that were available to be used, and so the US fleet just moved to those. But what was being detected then with these variations in the Schumann's primary frequency was that peaks of 9 hertz were detected in 96. A peak of 13.8 hertz was detected in 2006. And in fact, a peak of 21 hertz was detected in 2012. Now, anybody who has a look at those peaks and is aware of the Fibonacci numeric sequence, the natural numeric sequence that is very prevalent in growth patterns in nature, and is also related to the golden mean and the golden ratio. That the peaks that were identified between the mid-90s and 2012, anyway, were very, very much correlated to the Fibonacci numeric sequence. And so, where you would have a starting point in the Fibonacci sequence, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21 would be the first 7 or 8 points in that sequence. Very interesting to note that 8, 13, 21 very closely approximate what we were getting in the Schumann resonance. And so I put together this graph, and will continue to analyse the frequency changes and see whether we have correlation. But it's important to note that we've seen in the last year, we've seen Schumann resonant primary frequency as high as 100 hertz. Didn't stay up at that level, but it certainly did have a peak at or above 100 hertz, which is extraordinary for a extra low frequency, a persistent resonant frequency such as the Schumann resonance. So that leads you to believe, or leads me to believe, that there is a natural order to the change. It is consistent with what you observe in nature, that if you're going to go through a period of growth, that you adhere to a growth pattern. And the interesting thing is the Fibonacci sequence does appear to represent that growth pattern, a natural organic pattern in nature. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that there's a physical correlation between what the esoteric and energetic nature of the changes on the planet at the moment and the physical characteristics of the Schumann resonance itself is changing. And we know that there's a relationship between the Schumann resonance primary frequency and the human brain waves, to the point that if one changes, that being the resonant frequency of the Schumann resonance, then there needs to be a change in the corresponding brain waves of the human brain. And in fact, any other type of brain that is above, above what would be known as second density life forms or higher, that has a neocortex and any advanced neural capability. So if you look through the paper from here on, we were talking about any correlations or connections with the esoteric domain, and further investigation showed me that in reviewing the frequencies that are monitored and reported on by the Russian Academy of Sciences, that there are four frequencies that are monitored and that are reported on an hourly basis. These can be identified here on this chart, which is available on the Space Observing System website, which we'll go to in a minute. But these four frequencies, just numerically F1 to F4, approximate the ranges of 7.83 is the nominal range for the primary frequency of Schumann resonance. 13.5 hertz appears to be the frequency norm of the second resonant frequency. The third resonant frequency appears to be around 20 hertz, and the fourth resonant frequency appears at the moment to be around 25 hertz. However, each of those has a notional range. You'll note that when looking at the chart, each of those is given a upper and lower limit, and certainly has been seen periods of elevation far in excess of those limits. And so if you correlate those with the Fibonacci sequence, you can see some correlation, but also you see quite a clear correlation to a sevens numeric pattern, or system of sevens numeric pattern, or sequence, where the difference between F1 and F2, if you propose that it be around 7 hertz, the difference between F2 and F3 be around 7 hertz, and it is approximately that. Then if the difference between F3 and F4 was also 7 hertz, then you would see a correlation to that other fundamental pattern in nature, which is the pattern of sevens, or systems of 7. Whether you're talking about the primary colours of the visible light spectrum, there being 7 primary colours, whether you're talking about the notes in a musical arrangement, there are seven primary notes. Obviously, you've got flats and sharps and so forth, but you've got 7 primary notes, and then the 8th note is actually the first note in the following octave. So it is consistent with sevens, and you have 7 chakras from base to crown chakra. And so if you correlate these 4 frequencies to the first 4 chakras there, namely 1, 2, 3, 4 being the root or base chakra, the sacral, solar plexus, and heart chakras, then and consider that it is believed, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to anybody watching this video, that the Earth has chakras of its own. Because it's a living life form, and that chakras 1, 2, 3, 4 are what you would say are nominally activated or active, and we know that that correlates to red, orange, yellow, and green as the first 4 colours denoted by those first 4 chakras. And so, if you look at this correlation with the latest information, which is really been revealed in the law of one transmissions by the Ra social memory complex, by various channeled and esoteric sources. There's a lot of talk at the moment about this period of change, that we've entered into a period of intense energetic change, and a period of intense consciousness change, and that's what we're talking about. And consistently, the point is being made that any change that is happening to the planet would also happen to us. And it's clear that the planet is going through a period of enhanced energetic disruption that's causing these frequencies to change. We've got using the hypothesis that those 4 frequencies relate to the 4 chakras. We have the 4th chakra, the heart chakra, or green ray chakra, is activated, fully activated, I would propose, and consistently driving the nature of the change, because all of the literature, all of the advice is that the planet is progressing into its 4th density. That's a density of consciousness, not 4th dimension, but 4th density state, in order to support humanity's progression into being a 4th density life form. And that is a change in consciousness. The way that consciousness at best can be described in the physical is by brain activity in each of its the brain's various states, and that what we would naturally see is periods of change in the base frequency that really drive that change into the human persona as well, the human vehicle. And so, if we think about this in those critical terms, what we've got the Schumann resonance going through periods of intense change. It is true the energetic environment around the planet is going through intense activation, and what I would suggest is that we need to converge with that. We need to entrain with that. The best way we can do that is by maintaining as balanced an approach as possible. I'm sure everybody would know that we're in a period of intense disruption, and it's not just disruption on a planetary basis. if you look at some of the best earthquake and tectonic monitoring websites, and I would definitely do a shout out to Dutch Sense here as one of the preeminent voices in terms of presenting truth from a tectonic and volcanic perspective. It's clear that the planet is disrupted, but it's also clear that humanity is disrupted. And so what we're seeing is a very, very much two sets of behavioural changes as associated with the energetic environment and how disruptive it is. We have those who are doing the inner work, those who are focusing on themselves and focusing on service to others. So that's in a balanced way. Obviously, you can't be in service to others if you haven't got your own act together, if you haven't done your internal work. And so that's more an enlightened approach, I guess, even though I'm not judging those who aren't in that frame of mind or aren't focused on that improvement. But it provides a focus to ensure that we do our best to be balanced during these clearly disrupted periods energetically. And then I'm sure everybody can see, both in a political, a cultural sense, people that are on the extreme of volatile behaviour. And it's just going to get worse. Because if they don't understand the need to focus inward to find balance, then they're going to be in reactive mode. And reacting to this, particularly with the broad spectrum of emotional range that humanity has, being in a reactive mode is going to be chaos. And so what we'll have is this diversion of people's behaviour into two camps, more and more, where you'll have those who are trying to help, those who are trying to help themselves as well as help everybody else around them, who are doing the work but trying to be balancing whatever they do, and those who are just living the moment, who are reacting without thought often. And it's because their brain waves are probably in a very heightened state of disruption. Here I've called out a few key takeouts from these indicators that I'll just walk through. The first one is that changes in Schumann resonance are impacting all four frequencies, not just the primary frequency. They'll all be driven up, and they'll find a new home, a new stability. But that's not now, because what we're seeing is periods of greater and greater instability. And so it'll get worse before it gets better. There appears to be a system in place in terms of the arrangement of these frequencies that appears to both the changes in frequencies as they elevate appear to be aligned with the Fibonacci sequence, and the dispersion or the range of frequencies and the gap between frequencies appears to align to the system of seven sequence. If you have a look at the other paper that I published on Earth and solar changes, you'll see that we are in a period of heightened X-ray solar activity, cosmic ray and electromagnetic activity, particularly at a time when our electromagnetic envelope, basically our protective shields of the planet are in a period of disruption as well, because those north and south magnetic poles are definitely moving. They're definitely shifting, as you would see in that paper. And lastly, what we're seeing is that humanity is entrained to the frequency of the primary Schumann resonance, and if we can't get our natural chord rhythms and our nervous system synchronized, then we have a great deal of trouble ahead of us. But if we can do our internal work on and maintain a balanced approach to ourselves, then we can, when there's a shift in frequency, we can shift up to meet that and then balance at that frequency. It's going to be a period of disruption, but it should be very small when compared to those who aren't doing the work. Another really interesting point to note is with these, during this period that's often referred to as ascension. During this period of ascension, or what I've referred to as activation and convergence, we should be able to be a little bit more granular in terms of identifying what symptoms will be happening at what times based on what's happening with the 4 Schumann resonance frequencies, rather than just thinking of them as one. Because of the relationship to each of the 4 first or primary chakras, from root to heart, then if we see a major disruption on, or a major activation or enhancement of the frequency on, say, the root chakra, it'll be talking about your core health, your essence, your energetic basic health quotient. And so any disruption there could be something that you will need to just take more care of yourself. You need to sleep more, you need to get more rest, and you'll need to take extra care to address that imbalance in that area. But if you see something similar in the sacral or the solar plexus or the heart chakras, well, we'll be having a look, and I'll put out some messages on this topic in the future. But we'll try to be more granular about, okay, so if it's talking about your sacral, then it's talking about you as yourself, identity, individuality. If you're talking about your solar plexus, it's about you in your society, your relationships, are you having a balanced approach to others, or are you in this tug of war about control, which obviously we know control doesn't exist, but as you can see, the relationship between the chakras, the core nature of those chakras, and what behaviors or what aspects they influence, can have a real insight, provide us a real insight into what's happening in the planet, and then what might be happening to us. So we'll attempt to put out some information on that in the near future. And it's really important to note when you are having a look at the website, which we're going to go to in a moment, and we've seen one chart from that website already with the 4 frequencies showing their change over time. Looking at this, as many people do, they just focus on this chart, which is one of the charts on the Human Resonance website. It shows amplitude and intensity. It does not primarily show frequency change. And so it's really important that you understand that this is talking about the intensity of the waves. If you'd like, the peak of the wave, how intense or highly energetic it was, not how many waves there were per second, which is the frequency. So these are 2 very different elements to monitor, and so we will understand the nature of the impacts to us by, is it a frequency impact or is it an amplitude or strength or intensity impact? And so they will have different symptoms and different behaviours that will be shown to us. The rest of the paper really talks about some of what can we do. So these are motherhood statements. It's true, but they are definitely sound behaviours to put into our toolbox and to adopt whenever there's a period of intense energetic peaking on the planet. Rest as much as possible. Give your neural and your nervous systems time to adjust to the frequency changes. Maintain emotional balance. Practice mindfulness. Take yourself out of the emotional loop, outside of the reactiveness of that emotional state, and take a moment to be mindful of the state you're in so that you can make a decision about what you want to do, not just react. Meditate as much as possible to calm the chaotic thought patterns that can occur in the mind. And definitely, if you're in a triggering situation or event, use the 3 breaths rule. So this is 3 conscious breaths. So it's 3 breaths into your lower stomach region rather than your upper chest. This will reduce your tension and anxiety levels. Generally speaking, will lower your heart rate. and give you time to assess what you need to do. So this is usual conscious breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, using lower or what in Qi Gong context would be referred to as a regular or normal breathing. So the rest of the paper talks about some of the insight, experimentation and analysis that's gone into the Schumann resonant frequency itself, which is really interesting reading, but I'll leave it to you to read through. What we'll do is we'll just browse very quickly to the website itself. This is the Russian website, which is at sosrff.tsu.ru, as you can see here. And it's in English, it's referred to as the Space Observing System from Tomsk. And on the primary page, you just get graphs on measurements, where those measurements are taken in south central Russia there, Greater Russia. The Schumann resonance graph that everyone would be most familiar with is available there, and it'll just load the last 48 hours or so worth of historical Schumann resonance information. And obviously the internet's running a bit slow right now, but that information shows the peak intensity, as I was saying, the intensity of the Schumann resonance at the moment, not its frequency. If we were wanting to have a look at the frequencies, we've got to go down here, Schumann resonance frequencies. And as you can see, it's spending more and more, the primary frequency, which is in white there, is spending more and more time up above 8 Hertz. And so all of the other frequencies are elevating as well. Although that's not necessarily true. There are periods where you can find the primary frequencies elevating and the secondary frequency is actually declining. So there's no one-for-one correlation. And in fact, what you can see here is you see periods where there appears to be some quite good correlation between F1, F2 and F4, but not F3. So it's or here between F1 and F2, and certainly we've got a big peak here with F3. So it's not you know, that these are all absolutely consistent, but that there are periods of disruption. And it just shows that if we think of these 4 frequencies as relating to the chakras, the behavior of the chakras are synchronized but separate. And so their behavior is also more granular the further up chakra chain we go, the further up the order of the chakras we go. So that's effectively all I wanted to discuss here. Certainly an area where there'll be more information will come to hand over the next few weeks and months. But hopefully you found this useful. And if you have any questions or comments, please do leave them below the video. And I look forward to talking to you very soon about the other sort of changes that we're seeing. So with that, I will bid you farewell and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.